What was your reaction to the election results?
The election results were fascinating from a number of different standpoints. Obviously, the Biden victory, or presumed to be Biden victory at this point, but it looks quite good. Um, that was fascinating alone because the president, as we've learned over the last two presidencies, whether it's Obama or President Trump, has extraordinary power. Executive power is pretty amazing, and we've seen that. We've seen that through executive orders. We've seen it through a lot of actions. The pen and the phone, as President Obama once said, are mighty powerful. So that's really important. But then also the outcome of the races in the Congress were fascinating too, because the polls were so wrong. Probably hearing that now for the last 5 years, but certainly in the Senate, that's where it was fascinating to me because as an example, Susan Collins in Maine, she was never ahead according to the polling, and yet she won. Joni Ernst out in Iowa, same thing. So why does that matter? Well, it matters because you are not going to have, it doesn't look like at this point, a turnover in the Senate from Republican to Democrat. Now we have two runoff races in Georgia. My guess is they'll split them. And again, why does this matter? Because you're talking about the difference between a Biden presidency that has a split Congress and a Biden presidency that is a unified Congress. And you'll be able to do a lot more under a Biden presidency with a unified Congress versus not. And that comes into tax policy. That comes into a lot of spending areas. It comes into, obviously, a lot of Supreme Court justices, should that come up, and so on. So that's why this election was so Goldilocks for the markets and so positive overall for the economy, in the sense that you're not having a major shift from one side of the boat to the other where you could capsize the boat. So let's just use that tried and true analogy on that.
What impact will the election have on the CFTC, and what predictions do you have for who is going to be the acting chair and the new chair once President-elect Biden is sworn in?
I don't have a prediction on the chair, but I think one of the things that came out was the study that was done by one of the study groups for the CFTC on the environment, right? And that gives you a great indication of where that agency is headed and what they're looking at. They're certainly looking at the potential for how businesses are impacted by global warming, climate change, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's going to spill over into obviously what the Federal Reserve is doing on their regulatory issues, and the same thing with the SEC and disclosing these risks, right? That's a direction that I think the CFTC, the Fed are all going to go in that direction of ensuring that banks, trading companies, key components of our financial system let people know what those risks are, and if they can harden their structures to protect against them. So that's definitely where I see a Biden administration pushing that forward. When you go to things like with the Department of Labor rule, their fiduciary rule, and pecuniary interest, which just was finalized, I think that's going to get overturned. Why does that matter? Because that has big implications for ERISA and IRAs when it comes to ESG. And so that I think is going to be, it's all tied together with a focus on environment for the Biden administration.
Gary Gensler has emerged as a key financial regulation transition team member. What are the chances we see Gensler in a key administration role, including potentially as Treasury Secretary or head of the SEC?
I don't see him heading up the Treasury. It's either going to be Janet Yellen or Lael Brainerd, from what I can tell right now. And Treasury is really important, obviously, from a number of different standpoints. Regulations are important. Our interactions with our international partners and that side, a lot of the global preparedness for catastrophe when it comes to international or shocks to the economic system are really important. FSOC obviously is part of that. I don't expect Gary Gensler to head up the CFTC. He's done that before. I'm not sure you would get any forward momentum on him going back into that. The SEC, I just don't see him heading that up. I'm not sure he would be part of that. Him being part of the transition team, that makes a lot of sense. He left the CFTC, he went to MIT. So he stayed in this space. Obviously, the CFTC was a leader on that. The SEC has not. And that's on both sides of the aisle, dragging their feet a bit about having a mutual fund or ETFs on digital currencies. But you may see some pressure. But again, John, it really depends on who they appoint to that position, right? And what their thoughts are on digital currency. So, again, it's really hard to say right now. I haven't seen too many names floated at this point on either one of those positions.
What are the prospects for the digital dollar that former CFTC Chairman Chris Giancarlo is pushing for?
A lot of progress being made there, not only here in the United States, but globally. To some extent, you can make the argument that we already have one. So many things are moved digitally across the globe, but Chris is leading the way on that, and I welcome his efforts. I don't know how far that's going to get. The best news I can tell you on these types of projects is that Bitcoin has not failed, right? That's the key, right? That you have an example, you have a product that has not been hacked. Yes, the digital wallets have been. That was part of the growing pains, obviously, but you've seen Bitcoin remain intact, and that's the best news. And we are obviously in the throes of another big rally in Bitcoin, and we'll see how far it takes us. But there's so much work to be done on there. There's so much work that has to be done on a regulatory structure on that, not only here in the United States, but globally. There's a lot of problems with it. But what Chris is doing, I think, is going to be very helpful.
Do you think in general the Biden administration will be more pro-digital currency than the Trump administration?
From a regulatory standpoint, you have to remember, having spent time in Washington, D.C., working for a regulator, I will tell you this. Regulators don't want to adopt new products. They don't. They may tell you that they do, but they really don't. And the reason why they don't is because it's so much work, right, to get a new product in. Now, you can get variations on older products, and that's a lot easier. But a new product, the reason why they don't want to do it is because there is a lot of work. There's a lot of legal work that has to be done with it, but there's a lot of risk that goes with this. And you have to think beyond just whether this product will sell in the market or not. That's not really for a regulator to decide. You have to decide whether or not somebody's going to get hurt by this thing. And I'm talking about, yes, the retail investor. And that's what we saw going back to when Bitcoin was being kicked around in the CFTC and all the initial public offerings essentially for these digital currencies that came out, and they were so fraudulent and so many people lost money. It was incredible. And that's the thing that opened up my eyes when I was working for a regulator, is how many people get hurt by all the bad guys that are out there when you have a new product that's becoming available and people want to get on board with it. That's the tricky part about it. So there'll be some reluctance. There's going to be a lot of foot dragging. That's been going on since 2018, but they're getting there. So we'll have to see what, the Biden administration focus is. My guess, this is a back burner issue for whoever comes in the SEC. Again, I would reference the environmental stuff. I think that's more top of mind for them. I know that's top of mind for the Biden administration. They want to spend a lot of money on this. If you go and look at some of the work done by Bernie Sanders and AOC, you can see where the focus is. They won't get there on their big spending because they don't have both houses of Congress, but they can get there on the regulatory side of things. And Biden uses executive orders on a wide range of energy and environmental products that are out there. So keep that in mind.
The current CFTC was at times more like an old boys club initially. It looks like the Biden administration is going to make an effort at gender equality. What will this mean to the CFTC?
Diversity is so critical for a well-functioning organization. And you just see it time and time again. having a diverse viewpoint on how to look at a problem is critical for getting the best outcome. So that's the starting point. Now, we've got a long way to go as a nation and as a government. When I sat around a lot of the executive meetings at the CFTC, and as when I listened into the SEC, it was male dominated, to be sure. Now, there are women commissioners for sure, but when you're talking the managers of the organization, the division leaders, so many of them are men. Now, that's a choice that's made by the chairman on who to replace those division heads with when they come in. And a lot of times that happens when you see changeover. And that's usually when you move out the people that were brought in who are likely of the party in power, and then you replace them with the people that you want. And that's the opportunity. So we'll see. Now, these are like, the CFTC is a small agency and it's very technically oriented. So we'll see what their list of women and minorities that can take those roles. And that would be really good. I think it would be great. Same at the SEC, same at the FCC, same at the FTC. There's all these independent regulatory bodies that are not political by nature per se, but as president, you get to appoint those new heads usually when you come in. And so they'll drive the process. So back to your original point, will we see a woman head up, some of these independent agencies? I hope so. I hope many women are and get that chance to do that, because that will drive the change that will bring diversity in viewpoint to those agencies.